Sometimes it is really very difficult to cope up with the situation and struggles that we are dealing with. But if at the another moment when something that really we long for happens, so it can easily destroy all our worries and tensions. Yes, all. I'm Reena Mishra from SGEC. Welcome you all in the world of a music teacher who is struggling with herself. Yes. Today in this video we are going to discuss the story The Singing Lesson. Before diving into the story, let me tell you something about the narrator of this story. If we talk about the narrators of this story, then this narrator, who is Catherine Mansfield, was born and brought up in the colonial New Zealand. The writer of this story, Catherine Mansfield, was actually a prominent New Zealand modernist, short story writer, and a brilliant poet. She was born in 1888 and died in January 1923 in France. She wrote many short stories, and among them some are The Garden Party, Miss Brill, The Doll's House. This is the collection of her short stories. Now let's move with the story. Dear students, this story, The Singing Lesson, is actually all about a surprising day of a music teacher's life. This story is taken from Catherine's stories collection, The Garden Party and Other Stories. It is a short story written in third person from an unknown narrator's perspective. In this story, the central character of the story is Miss Meadows, who is a music teacher, and Miss Meadows receives a letter from her fiancé that states quite plainly that Basil, who is her fiancé, is not ready to marry her because he feels that the marriage would fill him with disgust. The word disgust is scratched lightly and is taken as the word regret. Naturally, as happens to all when we receive something bad, the same happens with Miss Meadows. When she gets the refusal from her fiancé, she is filled with despair, anger, and sadness. And due to her bad mood, she sees everyone and everything in a negative light. She starts looking everyone negatively. Her usual calm and cheery demeanor now turns up into gloomy and angry that day. And this change does not go unnoticed by her students. During the lesson, she is rather harsh with her students. She starts pretending that today they would be practicing a lament without any expression at first. since she was in gloom, so her each stanza, each word, each breath seems like a sob, seems like a groan and lament. Then she tells them that they must feel the despair, the fear and sorrow in order to perform the piece perfectly. Though the way she tells them so is not that simple. They are frightened by the sudden change in her behavior. During her lesson, she's informed by another colleague that Basil has set a telegram for her again. And her first thought is that Basil had committed suicide. And it's simply because the school has a rule. And the rule is that a telegram can be sent to a worker during working hours only in case of death or emergency situation. But in the telegram, Basil has asked her to ignore the first letter and that he had bought the hat stand which had been taken off lately. In short, the marriage is happening between them. The content of telegram definitely here the content of telegram definitely lights up her mood and she's back with her usual cheery demeanor. She returns and continues her class, now practicing a cheerful song, singing with expressions more loudly and cheerfully than any other students. My dear all, if we talk about the singing lesson, this chapter, this story is a bit weak in tone. This story is really, it's a bit weak in tone as compared to its 15 counterparts from the collection of Garden Party and other stories. But it is still a nice example of Catherine's talent of capturing real life moments and sentiments in the most beautiful yet simple way. From the starting, there is a slight touch of mystery and lyrical content. Yes, if we read the story, we go through the story from the starting, we can see that there is a tiny hint of mystery and lyrical content here. The author's way of making Miss Meadows see the reflection of a gloomy mood in everything, even in the sweet greetings from her colleague and student, is quite realistic. Because our mood can make us behave in the most peculiar way at the most wrong times. In the opening scene, the interaction between the science mistress and his and Miss Meadows is quite sarcastic. And with that, we can conclude that Miss Meadows was rather pessimistic. It is due to the shock she has received from her fiancé, or it is just her general nature. Really, we don't know, but she is reflected as being pessimistic here. But of course, towards the end, her mood changes and she is perfectly cheerful. So maybe we can say that the pessimistic way is only due to her bad mood. It is also safe to say that Miss Meadows chose to show her feelings and moods through music rather than words. The story flow is a bit intriguing as well because at first there is no mention of why Miss Meadows is in such a bad mood. And here readers are left to wonder and assume on their own. But the answer becomes quite clear at the right time without making the readers angry or irritated with all the guesswork and questions. Actually, the singing lesson is a short story which depicts a situation in the personal life of its protagonist, Miss Meadows, and it explores the nature of her emotional response to the same. Like most of Manfield's stories, this story thoroughly explores the multiplicity of emotions of its characters and the complex intricacy of an individual's life. Divide of a prominent plot or a definite ending, this story is a fine example of what Mansfield is known for. She is famous for shedding a light on complexity of everyday events in the lives of ordinary individuals. She is fond of it and she is famous for it. Her stories attempt to explore the lives of ordinary characters and in doing so, they lends them a sense of dignity by saying that every ordinary individual has an extraordinary complex story to tell. And it also states that this complexity is worth full exploration. We should explore this complexity to the extent of making it the primary subject that could be for the main plot for the story. And such a treatment to the character in her story become a powerful statement in a form where elements of plot and setting have traditionally been the dominant features. Most of her stories are devoid of clear beginning and neat end. And this is preciously what she does with the characters. She makes it clear that the individual inhabiting her stories cannot be identified with certain set of makers or be plotted in definite terms, that there are layers and layers of complexity that influence the actions and go into the making of their identities. That's why she believes that that every ordinary individual has an extraordinarily complex stories to tell, and this complexity is worth full exploration to the extent of making it the primary subject of her story. She explored the complexity of an ordinary person. If we go through or look at the plot of the story, we can say that it is a story of a music teacher, Miss Meadows, who experiences harrowing gloom and unspoken mental anguish owing to a split in her relationship with her lover. This particular slice of life is chosen to capture gripping attention. It mainly centers around a particular singing lesson class held at a girls' school. protagonist's activity in the class is used to show the changes in the human behavior brought by particular events in life. Here, the writer presents a profound psychological study of human psyche, as is evident in character of Miss Meadows. Miss Meadows got a letter from her fiancé offhandedly informing her the breakup of their marriage. And this is certainly a drastic and shocking incident in her life. It does not have but a pervasive after effect on her feminism sensibility. Through the story, we can easily conclude that life is a bundle of moments. Sometimes are moments of pleasure, or sometimes a moment of utter hopelessness and failure. Failures come to life to make us learn something. And the effect of the troubled relationship is abruptly noticeable in this music teacher's behavior, even though she tries desperately not to disclose it to her colleagues at her school, but she fails. She was utterly fails to disclose it, and her relationship agony automatically presents between the students. I told you now that this story thoroughly explores the multiplicity of emotions of its character. And the same happens with the character of this story also. This story is a bundle of emotions. And the flow of this story is a bit intriguing as well, because at first there is no mention of why Miss Meadow is in such a bad mood. My dear students, this is part 1 of the story. In our next part, we will be meeting with the theme appropriation, with the theme title appropriation, and many more questions. Stay healthy, stay safe. Till then, goodbye to you all.